It's really not very often I find a game with visuals that leave as lasting an impression as Hylics. It was this crazy RPG Maker game by stop-motion artist Mason Lindroth. It was a pretty simple RPG, but the visuals, they were anything but. Hylics was handcrafted with clay and digitized with a crunchy pixel look. The way all of these abstract shapes would unfold and morph, it was unlike anything I've ever seen. I've played other claymation games, but nothing that looked quite like this. I almost feel like the game's purpose was to create confusion. NPCs would speak in randomly generated nonsense, you increase your maximum health by grinding the meat of your enemies, and your face would melt off, sending you to the afterlife each time you fell in battle. It was weird as hell, but dope as hell. It's been a number of years since I covered that first game, and in that time they've been steadily teasing this incredibly ambitious sequel. God, and I thought the animations in the first game were crazy. The ones in this one were straight up mind-blowing. Lindroth's art style is incredibly unique, dabbling in the vague, the abstract, creating shapes that barely even mean anything and making them dance hypnotically across the screen. It's absurdist eye candy at its very peak. Or so I thought. Hylics 2 would push the visuals to an even further degree, but it seemed like there was a lot more to expect than just the improved graphics. The game would ditch its RPG Maker origins to create more interesting gameplay, better menus, and way more ambitious map design. And let's be real, there's only so much you can really do in RPG Maker. I do love seeing people push that thing far beyond its limits, but sometimes if you want to get really ambitious, you are gonna have to move on from those limitations. And that's precisely what Hylics 2 aims to do. It's still very much the complex visuals that have me excited to play it. I mean, that is why you play Hylics to begin with, right? For the weirdness of it, but of course I'm also interested in seeing just how different the gameplay is going to be too. But above all else, I'm ready for this thing to be as frickin' weird as possible, dude. Like, I've been waiting for this game ever since I reviewed the first one years ago. I've been waiting a long ass time, and Hylics 2 is finally here. I'm so stoked to play it, so let's do it. Whoa, look at that. That is a cool-ass title screen. Whoa, dude, I really love this. Stop-motion hands are a reoccurring motif throughout Hylics. With all the fights being in first person, you'll see these hands do the attacks quite frequently, but here they are forming the game's title. That's so freaking cool. Part of why I really love this idea is because we're technically looking at the very hands that crafted this whole game. The hands that modeled and animated these clay characters, so why not craft the title with these hands too? These hands made the game, so these hands will make the title. And if there's one thing this title screen gets across that the first game didn't, it's movement. The first Hylics had all of these crazy looking characters, but a lot of times we didn't get to see them moving. Hylics 2, on the other hand, makes it very clear right away that we're not just gonna get to see weird things, we're gonna get to see them in motion, and that is very exciting. Already, I don't even know what I'm looking at, but I love it. It looks like a gray brain, but molded into something else. Like we're being asked from the very beginning to unwrap our brains, to let go of our inhibitions and embrace the weirdness we're about to dive into. And the weirdness is pretty cranked up right out of the gate. Wayne now lives on an island full of Wayne larvae, other clones of Wayne, and Big Wayne, the elder of all Waynes. I think this might actually be the Wayne from the first game, now all old and wise and watching over a society of himself that now exists for reasons our feeble minds cannot make sense of. That's kind of how I like to view the complicated dialogue, because these are all real words. They just exclusively speak with the biggest ones a thesaurus could possibly provide, as if these clay beings have evolved far past what we can comprehend, and likewise their colloquialisms have all become absurdly complex. Just like the first game, the story is actually quite simple underneath all of those big words. The tyrant we took down in the first game, Gibby, King of the Moon or whatever, he's got some minions out there trying to revive him, so we just gotta go and stop them. It's like an NES game plot, like Zelda 2 or something, just a simple reason to get out there and experience the world the game offers. A simple trip through a very complex world, I guess you could say. And this world looks incredible, dude. Like, it actually blew me away a little bit when I saw that the world is not actually 2D like the first game. No, like, this is mostly 3D. I bumped this chair right at the very beginning and I saw it rotate and I was like, whoa! I guarantee they put that there there deliberately just so people would have that moment. That's so cool. All of these environments are fully 3D modeled. You can even turn off the filter to see what the models look like under the illusion, which is a really cool option. I always appreciate developers letting the player peek behind the curtain a little bit like that. But man, they really couldn't have done a better job with this. They seamlessly translated that art style into 3D so well that, honestly, if it weren't for this chair in the starting room, I probably would have spent a good couple of minutes actually thinking this is all 2D. And now that the world is 3D, the way you navigate it has changed a lot. Gone is the grid-based movement RPG Maker is known for. Now we've got 8-direction movement, boy, along with that jump button and an air dash that you'll unlock very early in the game. There's a lot of light platforming in this game, and there's things I like about it, and there's a lot of things I really don't. Okay, so firstly, the improved movement feels way better. You have way more freedom to explore. Being able to jump has added a lot of verticality. You're climbing up mountains and buildings, you're looking around, it adds a lot to how much you can explore. Dashing is also a really fun way to get around, especially with the sounds it makes. You just want to do it over and over. It's so much fun. There's also a hover move, similar to platformers like Rayman, allowing you to slow your descent. With this, you can line up a jump more comfortably, or if you want, you can just blissfully glide across these beautiful landscapes. However, while I do love how they added platforming and way more dynamic movement, it can be pretty clunky. At times, I would wonder if this was even the intended way up, or if I was just cheesing the game. You ever try to awkwardly jump up a cliff in an Elder Scrolls game, you know, fumble your way up there? Definitely not intended. A lot of it can feel like that. The fixed isometric angle paired with the 2D sprites can also make it kinda hard to tell where exactly in the 3D space your 2D character is. It wasn't uncommon for me to over or undershoot a platform simply because I couldn't tell where I was. Luckily, this has already been addressed in a patch though, which adds an optional indicator to show where you're going to land. Older platformers like Rayman 2 would usually remedy this in a similar fashion with the character's shadow, and as simple as it is majorly effective. Once this was added, I never had a problem landing anymore, though I guess the platforming and collision can still be clunky. I would still occasionally get stuck. It's really not the smoothest in the world. In fact, it can be downright clumsy, but it was totally worth it because it opens up so freaking much. Uncovering nooks and crannies that reward you with items is way more fun this time. One of the biggest appeals of Hylics is the strange world, so if you can add ways to discover more of that world, well, that's exactly what I'm looking for. Now, while the environments are now 3D, all of the characters remain hand animated in 2D with claymation, and the production value here is a major jump over the first game. The walk cycles, for instance, they're way freaking better. They've got way more frames, and they now accommodate for all 8 directions you can now face. There's even multiple costumes Wayne can rock this time. You still got that classic leather jacket, but if you want, you can go with a wiser look, sporting a long cloak instead, like Wayne's now a philosopher or something. I like that. You'll end up with the same motley crew from before. There's Sam's Nasa, the fan favorite technical type, Pongorma, your tank character, and Dedasmon, the guy who's like supposed to also be support, but I find Samsnosa a lot more helpful. I actually want to take a moment to appreciate these two characters. I know Wayne and Samsnosa seem to get way more love, but I think it's because they have more comprehensive designs. I actually struggle to remember what these two even look like when I think of them, and I think it's because their designs are so abstract. I mean, I look upon Gorma and I just see nonsense. I don't even know where his face begins, let alone ends. There's a chaotic energy he emits that I feel really enhances the experience, especially for a tank character, if that makes sense. That's part of why I really love seeing Hylics fan art, because there's a lot of room for interpretation with these characters. Here's one by an artist I bumped into at a convention last year that drew the whole gang. I really like his interpretation upon Gorma. He's grumping out hardcore. I remember somebody came up to me with this and I saw it and I was like, where'd you get that? I want one. And I searched the vendor room for like half an hour looking for the artist so I could grab one too, man. Like, I just love seeing people draw these characters. Hylics needs more fan art, dude. It really does. But anyway, the point being, I really love these designs because there's a lot of room for interpretation, but to such an extreme that I'm not even just talking about drawing them, but in even just thinking about them. This might not make any sense, but Pongorma is a very memorable character that I cannot remember, and the fact that Mason Lindroth achieved that is like kinda cool. The battles are where the animation gets seriously cool. This is where you get to see all the surreal animations for each attack, and holy sweet erect Jesus Christ, look at this! You can tell a lot of work went into these. The clay models are way more detailed and the movement is way more complex. Look at this bite attack, this brain with a mouth chomping down on ya. I don't even know what I'm looking at half the time. It's like the effects from spells had to be made with clay, and because of that they took on this whole new bizarre form. And it's not just the attacks that are animated either. Gone are those static, unmoving enemy sprites. No, forget about those. Here we have characters that'll dance around the screen with brain-melting movement. The animation on most of these enemies is straight up mesmerizing. You know how I can tell this is really effective? Because there's a lot of moments in all the footage I have from my playthrough where I'm not doing anything. And I actually remember it's because I would just spend like half a minute just staring at the screen every time I got into a fight. But you gotta start fighting because the enemy animations are only the tip of the iceberg. The player attacks all feature these iconic hand gestures, framed like it's in first person. This was something that was present in the first game too, but the animations here are way more grandiose. My favorite is the foam gesture. It's kind of like a healing / shield move, but it's like, it looks like this alien's intestines comes down from the heavens and foams y'all up. Oh my god, Pangorma's lightning gesture, this is one of the most satisfying attacks in like any RPG, I swear to god, dude. Like the movement feels so powerful, and when that final lightning strike lands and the enemy explodes and the meat chunks flying everywhere, oh my lord, this is a game that feels amazing to land that final blow. The item animations are all really cool too. They're similar to the first game, but again, way more frames, overall way crazier. I love that you don't eat a cookie in this game. No, you deploy a cookie. What does that mean? I don't know, but I love it. This is one of those games where you're really not going to want to hold back in the fights. I've played a lot of RPGs as a kid that really drilled this idea of saving special attacks and items just for the bosses into my head. I gotta hang on to them, I gotta save them, you know? But it's games like Hylics 2 that really forced me to combat that mindset. Each enemy encounter in this game isn't easy. You really just can't rely on the standard attacks. You will have to strategize, at least a little bit, and you will have to be using your items and gestures. There's a lot of emphasis on status effects here. Most of your gestures will inflict, remove, or move a status effect. You can make a different character defend, so you don't have to use their turn to do it, so they're defending, and then you can attack an enemy that's going to counter. The game does a pretty good job of actually encouraging using a lot of attacks that cost you will, because they have these bugs on the overworld that you can slap to recover your characters. I felt way more inclined to go all out in every battle because the game would reward my exploration between fights with what I needed to survive the next one. I'd also slap them even if I didn't need to because they explode into goop and it's so much fun to watch. It's like popping bubble wrap. You just never get tired of it. I really love that slapping animation. Wayne yanks off his glove and hits them with it like he's starting a duel or something. You're also able to use this on enemies in the overworld to get the initiative in battle. Some of the random fights can last quite a while, especially towards the end of the game, and I actually do kind of like that. Well, okay, I like it when it works, but when it doesn't, I kind of want to yank my hair out of my head. Each fight being a bigger deal than your typical fight in most other RPGs is really cool to me. There's something really cathartic about staring at these bonkers visuals while that gentle surf rock washes over you as you carefully decide your best course of action. It's actually really relaxing. I guess if you're the kind of person who isn't very patient though, then the fights may drag on a bit for you. That is a more subjective point overall, but I do admit there are times where I think it is a bit too much, even if you are patient. Like, come on dude, the enemies in the final area, that's what I'm talking about. These guys can status affect your entire team and heal themselves in full, all in one turn, and sometimes there's way too many priority enemies at once. Like these pool guys, they can duplicate themselves, so I always go for them first, but this weird looking dude here, I like this guy a lot actually. I like his little yappy mouth, it's really silly, but god is he a bastard. If he uses that umbilical cord move, you only have a short time to take him out before he deals huge damage to your entire party. When you have both of these guys at once, on top of other enemies too, it just gets annoying as hell. Some fights I use up so many resources, and like 4 turns in, the entire enemy team has full health again, I'm almost dead, and it's like I've made no progress. No, it's like I've made the opposite of progress. This wouldn't really be a problem if the game had a run button, but you cannot run from fights, so if you're in a bad spot and you want to start the fight over, your only option is to either quit the game and reload a save, or to painfully wait for your entire party to die so you can get warped to the afterlife again. Wayne's face will melt off again every time this happens, and oh dude, I thought it looked cool before. This is even better. Wow, that's cool as hell. Just like the first game, dying will warp you and your party to the afterlife. Afterlife. Here you can rest, you can look around and explore, or you can grind the meat you've collected from your slain enemies to increase your maximum HP, or flesh as the game calls it. Now, was a weird motif from the first game, collecting meat to improve your flesh, but there's a little more context as to what is really going on with it here. Not like outright explained, but there are some things that could be interpreted in some fairly grim ways. Things like finding a dying Wayne on the side of a beach, collecting his meat and adding it to yourself. It makes me wonder if the Wayne we play as is different each time we die. Maybe that's what's going on here. His being becomes meat, just like when we defeat an enemy. Perhaps the meat from our current Wayne is collected and used to create a new Wayne to play as, like crumbling your old clay figure into mush and using the remains to build a new one. And maybe that's exactly what Wayne is. There are tons of Waynes at the Wayne house after all, and it's kind of hard to tell if this is just a game being fun and weird, or if there's maybe more to it than that. I don't know for sure, but it's at least really fun to think about. The Afterlife as a hub world was handled so much better this time. In the first game, you had to die every time you wanted to go there to level up, which was pretty annoying. But now you can warp back and forth through these fountains. It definitely improves the pacing over the first game quite a bit. Now, increasing your flesh was really the only way you could improve your stats in the first game. Anything else came from the gear you'd equip, but Hylics 2 adds one more thing you can level up, and that is this entirely new mechanic, charging. Now, I know that seems like a typical RPG thing, having the option to charge up and attack, but what makes it so interesting in Hylics 2 is that it's actually an integral focus of the combat, and you'll even have to level it up to get the best results. Enemies can also drop antennas, which you can bring to this TV island, a place where TV people improve the charge signal by adding more antennas. Bring them here and your charge will level up. I love these TV dudes. Like, I don't know, there's something about characters with TVs for heads that's just really appealing to me for some reason. The music here is really fitting too. There's a lot of twang to it, that kind of sound you'd expect to hear from an antenna, right? That was easily one of the highlights of the first game, that surf rock. It was pretty chill and calming, like you're on a vacation in this incomprehensible nonsense land, but I admit, it did sound very amateur. This time, Lindroth has employed the help of musician Chuck Salamone, and buddy, his work on the soundtrack is so freaking dope. Like, it sounds like Hylics. It completely harnesses the exact same vibe and direction perfectly, while elaborating on it into some seriously good tunes. Like, you can tell this was done by a professional this time. The battle theme is this chilled out surf rock that makes every encounter a delight to sit back and browse through your options. And the more creepy sounds are still in there too, dipping into the synths whenever there's a sense of impending dread. The boss theme really cranks things up. It starts with this psychedelic funky riff that echoes around like you're floating on a cloud in space. And then yes, it creeps up, the instruments get more intense, and then the pacing in these songs are really freaking good. Like, they know when to reel it back, when to go in for the kill. No spoilers, but the final boss theme is fucking incredible. I'll show you guys later in a spoiler section. The airship theme is so freaking relaxing too. It's so chill and just, it's perfect for gliding around the world and taking it all in. This is where you really get to observe the world in all of its 3D glory. And normally you only get a fixed angle on the overworld, but here you can fly all around and see every mountain from any angle you want. Even soar up above the clouds. It is incredibly gorgeous. The choice in colors are an absolute delight. The acid-washed pinks and blues, they glaze over the horizon. It looks like a 90s Californian summer. A really good vibe that definitely pairs very well with the surf rock. I've actually seen a couple of people describe Hylics as an interactive album cover, and I really don't think that description could be any more accurate. You can tell a lot of work went into making this game look the way it does, and while that's fantastic, I couldn't help but to feel there was a little bit less focus on the humor this time. The game no longer has that randomly generated word pasta like before. Don't get me wrong, the dialogue is still strange as hell, and it does feel like every character has a thesaurus programmed into their brains, but it's much more deliberate now. A big problem I had with the first game is that I couldn't get any comprehensive hints out of the NPCs, and there were times I got super lost and I had a hard time figuring out what to do. That has been addressed here. I guess I do miss the randomly generated dialogue, but I do think it is for the better. The writing is still bizarre, but you will be able to actually take hints and stuff from it this time. You can also access the interior of your airship to talk to your party members if you need a reminder on what to do in the story. Yo, let's do spoilers now, because there's some stuff I want to talk about that's towards the end of it, so skip right here if you don't want to see that. Okay, so that word pasta is still in the game, but it's part of the plot this time. After Gibby is revived, he transforms all of the world's inhabitants into these formless gray messes, and just like the first game, they start to speak in riddles. This is really cool because now there's kind of like a story reason why they spoke like that in the first game, because Gibby was the ruler at the time, and his influence must have done that to people. Remove Gibby, and people become understandable again. This makes me believe that Gibby wants to embrace the world's incomprehensiveness. He wants it all not to make sense, to have no meaning. He wants reality to be a formless brain soup. This could be what motivates that rebelliousness that's in Wayne and his friends. They desire meaning. They want to shape the world, create things that are comprehensive and make sense, not just let the world return to resembling the bare components that form it. And these themes, of course, fall hand in hand with the game being made out of clay. Wayne could represent a stark individualism, the desire to stand out, the desire to be different and unique. But in spreading that identity, Wayne's individualism evolved into commonality. Gibby probably finds this threatening because Gibby also desires commonality, but he wants to achieve it by removing the entire world's identity. He doesn't believe the two can coexist. If I had to dissect some themes from the game, it'd probably be something like that. The clash between individualism and commonality, but that's just my 2 cents. The final fight with Gibby is pretty damn awesome. It's easily one of the most abstract enemies you'll face. His body isn't even linked together, it's just a bunch of floating bizarre shapes aggressively marching forward. It wasn't really all that hard to fight though. I kinda wish it was a little bit more challenging. The fights with the regular enemies from the final area were more challenging than this, but the set piece is undeniably befitting of a final fight, I can give that much at least. And the music, it just blasts out at full force with this chaotic and shapeless string of notes played on guitar and steel drums. That distorted bass line climbs and climbs as you think about your options. And then the wobbly strings, that chunkin' bass line keeps on going, and then it just... This is a final boss fight. I remember feeling kinda underwhelmed by the first game's ending, but this one goes out with a bang. No, it goes out with a frickin' explosion! The first game's ending kinda left me hanging, but this one, I felt satisfied as hell finishing this thing. Hylics 2 is a banger of a sequel, dude. Like, this is a game that understood exactly what its strengths were, and decides to focus on elaborating on that. It does have its fair share of hiccups, like the clunky platforming and the movement, and how frustrating some of the later fights can get, but it's the visuals you play Hylics for, so I think the focus was put in the proper category. But despite its flaws, I really do respect the hell out of Lindroth for getting way more ambitious with this one, moving to a 3D engine to have more dynamic movement, and going out of your way to create this amazing cel-shaded look just to achieve that. I mean, he could have just kept the game 2D and focused on the animation, but it's the willingness to march into territory you're not as familiar with to try and make something better. That's what makes this such an ambitious game. In case you couldn't tell, I really love the shit out of this game. Like, it definitely isn't perfect, but it certainly nails everything I was hoping it would. It's also a little longer than I expected, too. While the first game was only about 3 hours, this one can take you up to 8, so you'll definitely get a lot more out of this one, too. There's also a great variety of options to make the experience as smooth as possible. The controller customization is very comprehensive and simple to use, and there's difficulty options. You're able to tweak the challenge in either direction a little bit. You can change this at any time, too. 2, so if you really want, you could tone down those annoying fights towards the end. It doesn't have that dirt cheap price tag of the original, but the production value and amount of content are certainly higher enough to warrant it. It's 15 bones on Steam, but as always, I recommend getting it on itch so you get it DRM free and more money goes to the developer. I think Hylics 2 is going to be a game I remember for a very long time. I mean, the first game already left a lasting impression, but god, this one even more so. It's like experiencing raw, unfiltered brain electricity. It's like a fever dream. No, it's like your brain's trying to make a fever dream, but it can only make it out of incomplete thoughts that haven't even shaped fully yet. If you want some seriously delicious brain soup, drop everything you're doing, play Hylics 2.